All right, guys, here we go. Another day, another rumor. I haven't been able to stay on top of these like I would like to. This one's kind of big. I need to talk about it. So, the leaked Nintendo Switch final specs came out somewhat recently. Like I said, rumors, leaks, so this isn't 100% accurate, but I'm sure it's like pretty close to being accurate. So, the final specs come out, and TLDR, it's going to be weaker than the original Xbox One. So, it's going to be not as powerful as we all wanted it to be, as we were hoping it to be, as we were expecting it to be. A lot of people were disappointed. I'm not going to get into the technical details of it. There's plenty of YouTubers out there that have already covered this. I'm looking at a couple articles right now. I'll leave those links in the description if you guys want to check them out yourselves and read up on it. But I wanted to get into like an actual discussion about the Nintendo Switch, the overall power it's going to have, and why it won't really matter in the long run. So there's a couple of scenarios for the Nintendo Switch, a few ways it can play out. Let's go ahead. I'm going to look at some of the different scenarios. Like I'm not going to analyze all of it. I'm just looking at some. The first one I'm going to get into is like the best case scenario. Like nothing goes wrong. This thing comes out the gates, it's swinging, it's sold out everywhere. It's a Wii all over again. You can't find this thing anywhere, like not in stores, not online. Scalpers are selling this thing for like $1,000, screwing over everybody. Like it's like that big. And if it is that big, like third-party developers would not be able to ignore that. Like they would not be able to ignore the success of the Switch. Like, hey, this thing's moving units. Like we got to get on this while it's hot. Kind of like at the beginning, people were jumping on the Wii because it was pretty hot. So with that scenario, most of the major third-party games developers, they find a way to make their stuff work on the Switch. Yeah, it might be a little bit downgraded in comparison to the other versions, but overall the game works. Like think of PS2, GameCube, Xbox era, where the multi-plastic came out on all the systems. Yeah, the PlayStation 2 version, it was usually the weakest, but you know what? The game was still functional. So we kind of get that scenario. And adding on to this scenario, those games, those third party games that show up on the Switch, actually sell a lot because people want to play these games on the go. They don't want to limit themselves to just sitting on their couch in front of their big screen TV and playing these games. They clearly have that option if they want to for the Switch, but these people don't want to be limited there. They want to be able to take this thing, bam, pull it out, and Nintendo commercial themselves outside in to their friend's house, to whatever social gathering people do nowadays, whatever y'all hip whippersnappers do. That's what they do, but with the Switch, they up there playing on that rooftop with Karen. So that's what they doing. And adding on to this best case scenario, that trend continues. Third party developers see that their games are selling well enough on the Switch to keep bringing more of their games to the Switch. So we have the healthy stream of Nintendo games, of the third party games, and it's just a match made in heaven. We Super Nintendo all over again, baby. Now we playing with power, not really, but I just want to throw that slogan out there because it was awesome. Okay, now let's look at the complete opposite scenario, the worst case scenario. The Switch comes out, people just aren't really feeling it. The Switch itself doesn't really sell, and the launch lineup. There's a couple third-party games, and they're kind of half baked. And Nintendo is kind of doing what they're doing with the Wii U, where they didn't really have first party titles at launch. There was like a couple. There's like two or three first party titles, but they really left it up to third parties and they just dropped the ball. The system doesn't sell, the games don't sell, and your third party fizzles out. And it's the Wii U Part 2. And that would suck. And then like a year or two later, or no, I think it was the Wii U. It was about like 2.5 or 3 years later when Nintendo just said, we're done. We're done with this. Like we all saw the Wii U, like all the Nintendo Directs, 3DS, 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 more 3DS, maybe one Wii U game, 3DS. Here's some more 3DS directly to you. We're going to direct some 3DS at you, my man's. And then as time goes on, Nintendo just pretends like it doesn't even exist. And when they do come out with a game, it's below half baked. We're talking like Mario Color Splash, like Star Fox Zero, kind of like what was going on here? What was Nintendo thinking? And knowing our luck, they would do that. They would have that mentality that they just have that half-baked game, and it would be F-Zero or something like really big fans have been asking for like a bajillion years, and it's just like it's below subpar quality. It's a very highly unlikely scenario, but it's still a scenario that I need to throw out there. Scenario number three. The Switch just does okay. It sells a moderate amount when it comes out. It doesn't like break any records or anything, but it's a solid selling system. And Nintendo games obviously sell really well on the Switch. And third-party games, they kind of do, they kind of don't, kind of hit or miss. Depends on what game it is, this and that. So those third parties that have the decent selling games are going to stick around. The ones that didn't do so hot, they jump ship, they leave. So then we have this scenario where the Switch is okay as far as sales goes, and like I said, some third party games they do all right. So they stick around for a little bit, and you know it's whatever. That's that. No one's super hype about it, and it's not a flop either. Really, just a really mediocre scenario. Now, the fourth scenario, and the one I think is going to be most likely to happen, is the Switch sells. Like the system itself sells really well. I mean, it doesn't have to sell out like the original Wii did, but it sells really good. A lot of people are on board with this thing as far as the hardware goes, and they're buying the Nintendo games for it because you buy a Nintendo system for Nintendo games. Duh. Like no one buys a Nintendo system to buy multiplayer games, and because of that mentality, the third-party games don't sell. Third party games pretty much flop on this thing day one. And third party games are gone within 6 months, maybe a year. So, in my opinion, this is the most likely scenario to happen. Is that because I see a lot of interest in the Switch, and regardless of the specs it has, people are going to pick it up to play Nintendo games. Nintendo has some really good quality games that you obviously can't find on any other system. And with a price point of $250, that's very appealing. The versatility of the thing is just too good to pass up if you are into Nintendo games. Obviously, if you're not into Nintendo games, then why would you buy this thing? But Nintendo games do really well. Third party games flop and die off, and we're left with another situation where Nintendo is relying on Nintendo to carry this thing. Which this scenario could work out because Nintendo wouldn't have to focus their handheld and console divisions into making, games for separate systems. So we could get a more steady flow of Nintendo games. There would still be droughts here and there. It wouldn't be as dramatic. It would still be, it would be okay as far as the library goes. I mean, it could be even like a really good library, but you're obviously missing out on a lot of those third-party multiplat titles that a lot of people really do enjoy. So, quick lesson historically speaking, we all know third-party games don't sell on Nintendo systems, and it's been like that since N64 till the present. So unless these third-party developers are putting like exclusive stuff out there, like a No More Heroes, even then I didn't think that did that great. Zombie U actually did fairly well considering it was a day one like launch title for the Wii U. The Wii U didn't really sell that much at all, and it still got like isn't it around? I don't think it's around a million. I think it's around like 300,000. But when you look at percentages and the number of like Wii U's out at that point in time and the number of games sold, it was actually pretty good. So, uh, you know, stuff like Bayonetta and all that exclusive stuff will do okay. But we all know that even Nintendo fans don't buy multiplats or third-party games for Nintendo systems. I have with the Wii U. I got a butt ton of multiplat third-party games on Wii U. I know that sounds like really wrong, weird, stupid. And honestly, I'm gonna be real with you. Those games are pretty gimps. Don't run that well. I rage quit Darksiders 2 because the game froze in the middle of gameplay, and I was just done. And I think I was kind of close to the end too. I should just go back and finish that. But long story short, like we all know that Nintendo versional multiplats are just not that great, which is why, like I said, even Nintendo fans will buy their third-party games on their PS4, Xbox One, PC. So that's why that last scenario is like the most realistic to me. Like the Switch does well because there's a lot of interest in it. It's like fairly unique as far as like the big trio of gaming goes. I'm not saying it's never been done before, but I'm saying as far as Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, in that realm, it's a pretty different concept. So I think hardware wise, it's going to do great. The Nintendo games are going to sell, but third party games just won't because we've pretty much been conditioned to not buy third party games on Nintendo systems. They're usually weaker performance, they're missing a lot of features, they don't get the DLC. The list goes on and on. So I think that's going to happen. Don't hold your breath waiting for third-party support on the Switch. If these power specs are true, even if they're not true, scenario 4 is still probably going to be the most likely scenario to happen. Like let's be real here. And at the end of the day, that's kind of why the Switch's power doesn't really matter. Of course, it needs to be a step up above the Wii U, and it needs to be powerful enough to go on the go and do its thing and run these games. But at the end of the day, it doesn't need to be the same power as Xbox One or PS4 because one, those games are probably not going to sell on the Switch, and those developers and publishers are going to leave anyways. So, is what it is. I hope that's not the case. I hope they stick around and put stuff on there and they sell really well. I really hope it does great. I hope third parties do great. Like I said, not going to hold my breath waiting though. But then again, what would I know? I'm just some guy on the internet.